Wi-Fi.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, it's Anne Healy here.
Hello, Anne. It's David Molocco here.
Hello, David.
We're waiting for a few more people to turn up. I can see Steve not there yet.
David, you're down as Phil Moore. You'll need to rename yourself.
Oh dear, I don't know how to do that because I'm using my business partner's iPad.
Because if you go up to the three dots on the right-hand side and click it open, you can actually rename.
Oh dear, I don't know how to do that because I'm using my business partner's iPad.
Because if you go up to the three dots on the right-hand side and click it open, you can actually rename.
I don't know how to do that because I'm using my business partner's iPad.
If you go up to the three dots on the right-hand side.
Meeting settings. Can you see?
I'm using my business partner's
Meeting settings.
A lot of it going.
Can you all hear us?
Yeah, I think they're getting feedback. There's a lot of feedback.
Yes, I can.
Right. They're all mute too. So, yeah.
Can you give us a thumbs up that you can hear us, please?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, right.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. David Molocco, can you hear us? Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thumbs up that you can hear us, please.
What's the feedback?
Cool.
Yes, I can.
David Molocco, can you hear us? Yeah, good. Thank you.
Don't hear us.
That's good.
Yeah, we're on. Thank you. So sorry about that's my first day, so I apologise for that.
So can I open the meeting? Okay. I'm Peter Webber, the chair of the panel today, and I formally declare the meeting open. My three colleagues on the panel today are the two expert members, Ron Edgar on my right, Chris Young over there, and the community representative, Meredith Shield, across the table, and the council staff members who are sitting in the full meeting, Steve Karipas and Sarah Seconds. So the meeting's formally open and we have present a number of consultants whom we'll introduce later. First item is just confirmation of the minutes of the last planning panel meeting, which was held on last year, a long time ago, certainly for December, and by coincidence, according to my minutes, draft minutes, both Ron Edgar and Chris Young were present as expert members of that panel.
I'll move those, Mr.
Therefore,
Chair.
they could be,
And I'll second.
they could be moved and seconded, and the other members can't vote because we weren't there, but we'll carry it, declare the minutes confirmed unanimously, I guess.
Mhm.
Now, we have four items on the agenda today. The challenging and most complex one, I think, is item 1, the 2 Gray Street at Hunters Hill. And we have registered to speak today 4 people, the architect and town planner, David Molocco and Anthony Petrus, respectively, can speak as applicants, and Anne Healy and Anne Katie will then speak as objectors. You each have 3 minutes max, and there'll be bells and beeps to tell you when that time expires. And if the chairman's feeling in a generous mood, you might get another 15 seconds. And I assume that David Morocco and April Petros are fairly aware of the objectors' objections and will have had access to those. So it's over to you, David, perhaps first to say what you feel you need to tell us. Or, yes, David Morocco.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, I'll speak directly to the architectural design, and Anthony Betros will talk mainly to the planning and more numerical issues regarding the proposal. So in front of you is a proposal for a 2-level dwelling on the waterfront at 2 Verrett Street, Hunters Hill. The building is, in our opinion, very modest in scale, having spent a lot of time on the site and also on invitation going to number 10 Campbell Street to ensure that our impact on number 10 was minimal. The building is within the LEP's height requirements. It presents as a faceted building to the waterfront, running the line of the foreshore as 3 individual segments, and each segment presents to the waterfront as a single room to help preserve that fine grain and low bulk and scale. And each one of these segments is separated vertically rather than horizontally as well, to again reduce the scale of the building. The overall, as I said, the overall height was modest. We went over to number 10, had a look at where the view losses would be, and the building is well below the line of their windows and is set back from the line of their windows, so they maintain their view across our site. The building is the building on the eastern side, when viewed from the water, is broken down again with a inset timbered section into a bag brickwork facade with a timbered eaves, again creating further 3D modulation to the facade. The building presents as 2 stories from the water, but because of the topography, it reduces to a single story when viewed from the south. And also, I'd like to mention that the building's swimming pool is wholly on grade, and we've placed it over the western side of the boundary for a good reason. The reason why it's over on the western side is the building, when viewed from the water, is viewed best from the northeast, and to create a sense of scale to the natural, to the proposed landscaping, we've pushed the building's pool over to the north, to the western side, so that the landscaping we're proposing blends into the landscaping of number 4 Verrett Street, which has extensive lawn and landscaping on the water side, apart from a small boat shed. What else would I like to say about this building in terms of the architecture? The landscape proposal is something I think that's worth looking at. We had Black Beetle landscape architects do what we think is a very commendable landscape proposal, which fits in with the informal natural landscape requirements of the that's required in foreshore areas. The building is completely behind the foreshore building line. The only built works forward of the foreshore building line is the swimming pool and small triangles of uncovered raised terrace areas, which are slightly forward of the foreshore building line and raised by maybe just under a metre.
David, I think we might leave it at that. I think the bell has rung, so This has
No,
been-
that's fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, if Anthony Petros would also like to address us.
Thank you, panel. Just start off, I note there's representatives of the objectors either side. So if I can address the concerns that they've raised, firstly. So number 4, Verrett Street, as you would see from the site plan, is sited to the east, but the house is set up towards the Verrett Street alignment. In contrast, where the proposed dwelling is sited way further north on the subject site and sits a considerable distance. I've measured it to be almost 20 metres from the nearest southern point of our dwelling to their closest northern point of their dwelling. In between that is existing and proposed landscaping. Furthermore, our proposed height is set well below their outdoor terraces and the dwelling in general. So there will be no privacy, no overshadowing and no view loss to that property. And I think the way that David has designed the building in a staggered, fragmented form also minimises the built form as viewed from that property and from other vantage points from the waterway and from the west. Council's report also significantly notes that it would not be visible from the street, from Verrett Street. Turning to number 10, to the west of the subject site, as you would be aware, that's a quite a domineering 4-storey dwelling house, and the design has been carefully responsive. And David has visited that property to make sure that their views to the north and east are maintained. I think all the elevations clearly show that this 2-storey form is quite modest when perceived in relationship to that property, and also will not affect their privacy, view or sunlight. The dwelling is quite modest in terms of facade on that property. It's only 0.286, which is well below the 0.5. The benefit of the RMS land at the front being incorporated provides for a substantial setback from the foreshore. And the way the building is staggered actually aligns neatly with that splay of the foreshore alignment. The building is fully compliant, as you will note from Council's report. We have amended the application, and I'd like to thank the officer who dealt with the application. It was a consultant, and there's been quite a team process in that regard where they've requested amendments and these have been made, and it's provided for a fully compliant diagram, as the document, as you'll see on page 29 of your report. I note that there was a late objection, and we have not had time to deal with that. And I'm not sure if you want me to address that panel or not at this point, but I'd happy to come back after the objectors if need be.
I think we'll hear the objectors first, and then if you hang around, if we have any questions for you, we can do it that way.
Thank you very much.
So the 2 objectors registered are Anne Healy and Ian Cady, in whatever order you'd like to speak.
Excuse me, David, can you mute, please?
Why?
Go ahead, maybe, Anne.
Would you like me to speak first?
Yes, please.
My name is Anne Healy, and I'm the daughter of Raymond Healy, who's the owner and occupier of 4 Verrett Street, Hunters Hill. My father will be 91 years old in a few months, and I am speaking on his behalf today. I wish to focus on one aspect of our objections. There's 2 documents in the papers, but the objection that I wish to raise concerns minimum lot sizes, which is 10.6 at 24 of your papers. Council planners have recommended approving the subdivision by assuming, wrongly, that an adjacent parcel of reclaimed maritime land will be able to be purchased by the applicant. This assumption has led to factual inaccuracies in the council planning report regarding the lot size of the proposed development, which then gives the appearance of compliance with the LEP. We have obtained advice from a specialised maritime planner that there is no legal pathway for the applicant to purchase the adjacent reclaimed land, even if there was written agreement to do so. It is our view that the DA should be assessed on the size of the lot actually owned by the applicant. In 10.6, I don't have time to go through it with my 3 minutes, but the council planning report erroneously assumes that the intention by Transport for New South Wales is to sell the reclaimed land to the applicant. The permission to lodge from the TFNSW is based solely on the issues of safety and navigation and tenancy. It does not look for any DA conditions of consent. It does not mean that Transport for New South Wales supports the detail of the DA. I would ask the panel to consider these important questions. Why would the developer initially seek approval for just the unit block and not the subdivision and secondary dwelling? Was it so they could rely on that approval to get this development approval through? Thirdly, are they now trying to get approval for a secondary dwelling first, and then when they can't purchase the reclaimed land, they will use this approval to seek variation in the minimum lot size for their subdivision? To conclude, there appears no legal pathway for the applicant to purchase the adjacent reclaimed land. It is legally risky for the panel to approve a DA, which prima facie is non-compliant with the LEP on minimum size lots, and the panel is urged to reject this application.
Thank you, Anne. Very clearly put. That is obviously one of the issues that we have to look hard at. Thank you. And
Thank you.
unless there's any questions of Anne, then Ian, Katie.
And unmute, please.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Ian Cady, Director of Planning at Mecone, representing Richard and Linda Perini, the owners of the adjoining property 10 Campbell Street. We have made submissions to both exhibition periods.
Sorry, who do you represent again? I didn't quite get it.
The owners of 10 Campbell Street, Richard and Linda Perini.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yep.
In addition to those previous submissions, following our review of the officer's report, we have taken advice from Addison's lawyers on a number of concerns that we have about the assessments made in the report. I'll try and go through as quickly as possible. There are 4 key areas I'd like to highlight. One is concern about the deferral of Aboriginal heritage assessment. Second is lack of information about the FSR of proposed Lot 1 and the power to approve that. The third is the inclusion of car parking for the Lot 2 within Lot 1. And finally, the deferral of the identification of a suitable area of communal open space for the retained or approved residential flat building. Going first to the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Assessment, it is recommended that this be deferred to the Director for approval. However, the Aboriginal shelter and midden that are located partly on the site are essential matters for consideration. Without fully understanding their extent and possible relics, it is not possible to assess potential impact to the proposed dwelling house. Deferral avoids consideration of the question of whether an Aboriginal heritage impact permit is actually required. And furthermore, the Director of Development or Regulatory Services does not have the power to impose the necessary and reasonable conditions of approval arising from any consideration. That would be a matter for the panel, as this is a matter for the panel's consideration. We have also submitted legal advice yesterday via Addison's lawyers that the recommended deferral is contrary to the Court of Appeal's decision in Wheel versus Bathurst City Council. On to the second point is the lack of information of compliance of the approved residential flat building. Both the application and the assessing report simply says that existing use rights apply and therefore floor space ratio is irrelevant. This is legally incorrect. There was a day when existing use rights gave you a free kick, if you will, on any development standard. The courts have made abundantly clear that is no longer the case, as evidenced by the consideration of a height clause 4.6 variation in the court application for the approval of the residential flat building. On to the third point, the inclusion of car parking. There's 2 ways of handling this project. One is that it is an integrated single residential flat building, in which case the parking can be on any site, or there is 2 separate developments. the applicant and the assessing officer, by way of conditions requiring physical separation between the two, have gone down the path of two separate developments. It is therefore not possible to provide the parking for one development on the other on a separate Torrens allotment. Then comes to an issue of use, because car parking is conventionally provided as an ancillary to a dominant purpose. But within the residential flat building, the car parking provided in association with the dwelling house is no longer ancillary to that dominant purpose and is therefore defined as a car park. A car park is a prohibited use in the zone and therefore cannot be approved. The final point about the communal open space, the 25% required communal open space for the residential flat building was previously provided on the flat area where the new dwelling house is proposed. Nowhere has it been identified where this will now be provided for the residential flat building, and is proposed to defer this. The problem is the only two areas where it could possibly be provided are a steep vegetated escarpment cut in two parts. On the east, there is significant Aboriginal heritage extant, and on the west, there is a quite convoluted stairway serving the proposed new dwelling house, rendering that area unsuitable for communal open space use. I think I'm at time, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Ian Katie while he's on the screen? No, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think one had a question earlier of what, David Morocco, wasn't it?
No, of Anthony Petros.
Anthony Petros.
Thank you, panel.
Okay.
Am I back on okay?
Anthony, I've got just a couple of questions on it, but as we know, it's fairly complicated. Do you have any timing on when the Transport for New South Wales land would be available, or when it would be purchased by the applicant?
No, but I note planning condition number 1 just states that the consolidation is required of the transfer. So we can't get a CC till we get ownership. So I don't know that that's particularly relevant in terms of a time frame. But there's been indication that they will sell in writing, and I understand there's been no change as of this week to that effect. And I think Mr. Moloko could expand on that if you need to.
So we don't know. We haven't got any time frame. Do we know whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months?
It was dependent upon the approval, of course, and I understand it would be granted. So, as I say, you can't get the approval unless you comply with condition 1. So, but if I can just defer to David if he knows any more than that. Sorry to chop and change.
Okay, Ron, any other question?
Yes, Anthony, do you see this approval as replacing the LEC approval for the residential flat building?
No, it's a standalone DA. It's in association with. So it's alternate to the approved flat building. We're not touching the units. We are amending the car parking to provide for the car spaces to the house, and also providing an easement and access. So it's in association with. So,
but there will be changes to the open space, the size of the land description, etc.
Correct. So I should just confirm the description is alterations and additions to the approved flat building, comprising reconfiguration of the car park, 2-storey dwelling plus Torrens title subdivision. So it is more or less an all-encompassing application. Yes.
You've seen the objections that Ian has referred to. Do you got any comment on those, and particularly the issue about the permissibility of the car parking?
I can't agree with that. I'm not a lawyer, and I know that was provided by Addison's, and I think it's a bit unfair to have to respond to that, given that wasn't in the original objections and that it's only been lodged yesterday. So for procedural fairness, I think it's quite unjust. But in any event, the flat building was approved via existing use rights. The car parking is association with the dwelling, which is permitted on the site. And via an easement, I can't see any issue there from a legal perspective. And council's report has assessed that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Sarah, have you got any?
Yes, I have a question. The Application, as you've said, is for alts and adds to an existing approval, a new dwelling and Torrens title subdivision. I would put it to you that the primary application, therefore, is actually the Torrens title subdivision, and that you need to meet those standards first, and then the considerations regarding the building footprints and the buildings on those new proposed lots would be secondary considerations. Have you, because we seem to have a lot of information about the buildings, but what we don't seem to have are the compliance, if you like, of the actual subdivision proposal with the LEP and DCP subdivision requirements. And, you know, for example, the DCP 3.8, which is pertaining to subdivision. The other thing I think it's important to note is this particular lot of land in terms of subdivision approval falls under a range of different restrictions. It's next to a heritage item. It's in a heritage conservation area. It's in the foreshore protection zone. It's in a riverfront area, and it has important Aboriginal artefacts on it. All of those are going to play into the LEP and DCP constraints on a subdivision, on just approval for a subdivision. But when we go to the DCP, the approval for a subdivision requires, first and foremost, the lot size, obviously, that's the LEP. But if I can just bear with me for a minute. 3.8.8 in the DCP is access. A proposed subdivision should satisfy the following restrictions and requirements. Provide vehicle access to every allotment. Now, I don't see that there is vehicle access to the allotments. There's a right of way to a car parking space internally on allotment 1, but there's no vehicle access to lot 2. In order to accommodate off-street parking locations, there's no off-street parking location identified in lot 2. In subdivision, it then provides requirements if you have a battle axe allotment and provisions for the driveway. Those are not discussed at all. The minimum corridor width, access ramps, grades and designs all need to be addressed and discussed. Under DCP 3.8.3, subdivision of heritage items or land adjoining heritage items. Any proposal to subdivide a heritage item shall be accompanied by a heritage management document. And, you know, that clearly needs clear definition of all the heritage items on the land, including rock shells, significant trees, Aboriginal artefacts. You know, at the moment, we don't have an understanding of the extent of the Aboriginal restrictions on the land, so that, you know, without this, we can't even approve a footprint for a building on a new proposed lot. Has any of this been addressed that somehow that I've not had access to?
Thank you.
There's also a proposal for built area. You know, there's a minimum built area that you have to be able to show that you can fit on the lot, taking account of the restrictions for where you can build in terms of the natural environment, the significant trees, and the Aboriginal land. So
Meredith has summarised quite a lot of the issues that are concerning us in that question, but a specific question then, Meredith?
Well, I'm just wondering, you know, if that information is available somewhere, because it hasn't been provided to us in the submission.
Next, Anthony or David?
Thank you. Well, Council's report actually, in my opinion, does address each of those issues. It states that we meet the minimum lot size for one. It then turns to the assessment of the new dwelling and finds that it to be totally compliant in relation to all the DCP aspects. Furthermore, we submitted a heritage report with the application, and Council's heritage officer has in fact provided quite a detailed heritage assessment of how it relates on the site to the conservation area and also to the adjoining heritage items. In terms of the archaeological issues, that's also addressed as being not specific to the, says the footprint of the new dwelling is outside the area of the Aboriginal site, the registered site that is, and is unlikely to impact the site, notwithstanding a subsurface test is to be provided. That could be via a deferred commencement condition, and we'd be happy to accept that. But I do think the report and our SEE did address all of those issues in relation to the DCP. In terms of access, there is access via the front of the site, and that's why it's in association with the flat building in terms of pedestrian and vehicular access. So while it doesn't have its own battle axe corridor, this is a far more sensitive response by providing it through the existing arrangement.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Okay. No more questions of the applicants or objectors, I gather. Thank you very much. We'll stay on the air, as it were, I think, for some discussion now, and then we may need to go into recess to reach our final conclusion. But now, would the panel like to address any of those issues, or ask our consultants or the council's consultants, Stuart and Gordon, whether there are any particular issues while we're not familiar with it? Having heard the objectives?
Yeah, I thought after reading the report and comparing the drawings, I thought that most of the issues that have been raised have been addressed and at the bulk and scale. But I still don't understand the issue of the acquisition and of the RMS land and the integration of that. If that were to fail, obviously the DA would be invalid. Well, Mr. Chairman, from my point of view, the information that I received in the reports and the plans, etc., and listening to the information that we've been given here, from my point of view, I don't believe that we've got enough information. I don't have enough information to feel confident that I could support approval or support the recommendation at the moment. I would think that there are quite a number of issues that are still outstanding that are going to take some time. And I think that's even a deferral to get this information will take a significant amount of time. And I would be moving a refusal of the application because there is issues that have been raised about the Aboriginal assessment part. The Council's Heritage Officer in the report suggested the investigation of the Aboriginal objects in New South Wales need to be undertaken prior to determining the application, rather than giving the delegation at the moment. I feel much more comfortable with seeing that information before determining the application. I haven't got any information about assessment of the total site developments, the dwelling house and the residential flat building, and seeing how that applies with all the issues that are required to be looked at in the site. The land size and the ownership timing, the development relies upon getting the transport from New South Wales land. That's the obtaining of that land seems to be unknown at the moment. Having personal experience of dealing with what was in the RMS about getting similar lands, that's a very timely, a very lengthy process, and deferring an application or giving deferred commencement for that particular time frame, I think would be too great. And I think it is very, very important, it's fundamental to the application to have that amount of land as part of the application. And then further, I think there are a number of legal questions that we need to be resolved. They're certainly not resolved in my mind in regards to the car parking definition of it's been raised also about the sale of the transport for New South Wales land. I think we need that clarified. Also need some clarification about car parking on different sites as well. So that's sort of issues in my mind whereby I'm uncomfortable, with approving an application and even deferring it. So I think I'd be moving refusal.
Well, we're just having discussion at the moment. Or do you want to formally move, and we can move in second and then have some further discussion?
I'll second that proposal because I feel very similarly. I feel there's inadequate information to make a decision on this, the subdivision proposal primarily. I don't believe that the information provided addresses all the requirements under the LED and DCP for a subdivision proposal in this particular sensitive site. And there are a number of unresolved issues, so that I don't think that the information will be available until such time as the land size issue is resolved. The Aboriginal architect assessment is resolved, and access and parking and meeting the DCP requirements for street frontage and vehicle access is resolved.
Thank you.
And those are three critical things.
Just by way of Chairman's comment to the objectors and applicants, I think the design of the additional dwelling was not a cause for objection in our preliminary discussions, in that it fits in, it's quite low, it fits in comfortably in the landscape, you've got a green roof, and the neighbours at number 10 and elsewhere would hardly be aware it existed, in my view. So we're hardly aware of the difference in many ways. So our concerns, I think we've, our preliminary discussions that have been summarised by the mover and objector, are things that concern us. Just, I mean, I don't object to the car parking being where it is. It could work quite efficiently. However, there are legal issues that haven't been resolved. And we feel unable to, well, there's a general feeling we're unable to support in that sort of situation. So that's where we stand. I don't know whether...
No, I would agree with all of that. The architecture, the site management, I don't really have a problem with, but it's the unanswered issues, particularly with the Aboriginal archaeological assessments. And Stuart, you have something?
Yes, please, panel. Just with respect to the ownership issue, I'd like to bring to the attention of the panel that I have a correspondence from Transport for New South Wales dated the 19th April 2021 that states that the Transport for New South Wales has made an offer to the owner of 2 Direct to sell that land to them, and that they're willing to sell the land to them. So I have that in writing from Transport.
It's a very recent letter.
Yes, it supports a previous offer from Transport for New South Wales to the applicant to sell the land to the applicant.
Okay. That's very, very useful to know, but whether we can change our views without that being, the offer being accepted and confirmed, I'm not sure.
I don't think it provides the certainty that we need for...
No, or the timing. So, but yes, I'd just like to second, you know, that the considerations regarding the design of the 2 separate buildings on the 2 separate lots are secondary to understanding the footprint, the allowable footprint on each of those lots. And, you know, once that is confirmed, that requires the Aboriginal assessment. And, you know, once that's confirmed, I think we would all agree that if the siting is acknowledged, then you know the design of the building is actually.
As I understand it, I don't think I've seen any diagram or plan which indicates the extent of the Aboriginal archaeological.
No, well, they don't know it yet. So
the actual extent, and as you've just said, Meredith, the footprint of the building as planned may extend unacceptably into that footprint. I don't know whether consultants have any further information on that.
Is there a location plan for the cave?
No,
there's not. Feel a bit disadvantaged that we haven't been able to access that part of the site.
No, I've seen the location on my site inspection, and it's located under a rock shelf. It was considered as part of the previous development by the court with respect to the residential flat building, and my understanding is a management plan in terms of its protection during development was approved as part of that for approval as well. So the matter of the impact of the residential flat building, which my understanding is the site is closer to the footprint of the residential flat building than the proposed dwelling, has been considered during the proceeding. And I am of the opinion that it is outside the footprint of the dwelling, and therefore that's why I recommended. I feel comfortable recommending that the further assessment be undertaken and deferred to final determination be deferred to the undertaking that consideration, because I felt likely that it would be more of a management document informing how development should occur in its vicinity rather than actually one confident.
But how could that management,
I
how could
don't-
that
I- yeah.
management plan be cast under this development application? It's not a section 96. This is a brand new DA, so
Yeah.
they don't really carry forward.
Correct, so a
I think
management
it's-
plan
yeah.
may need to be implemented as part of this DA separately to the development of the residential flat building.
I think it's also important, you know, to understand it's a cave and a midden, and that would imply that Aboriginal activity was occurring between the foreshore and the cave and the midden, which will be over the land, that is subject to this new development, and that is what has been recommended to, you know, excavation work to look for any Aboriginal artefacts further afield. So I think that's important that is done. You know, before designing the building.
Just to understand it, that RMS land that's been built up, that's not a natural feature. It's reclaimed land, reclaimed. So
Yes.
chances are that that's covering further middens along the boundary, but it's just not been researched. Or was it, I don't know, if in the absence of the
Water at that stage, but it could be.
yeah.
I think we have a consensus of the panel that we are concerned, having seen no diagrams, no information about that as part of the application. The panel does feel very concerned that we don't have enough information to
approve the
confidently support the
subdivision.
development.
Yeah.
There's one other question about the car parking issue. Reading from the Addisons, this lawyer who submitted this long submission, page 2 of the submission by Helen McFarlane, is it? The writer, Helen McFarlane, consultant to Addisons, page 2C, that part of the basement car park in the residential flat building providing parking for the proposed dwelling house should be characterised as a car park, which is a prohibited use. She's saying it's a legal issue, and I didn't really put my mind around it, but and functionally, we can't see why it shouldn't work that way. But we're concerned about the legality of the approval.
Do you like me to comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I don't agree with that advice, respectfully. I see the car park as being fine. It is, I feel that for two reasons, it's outside the definition of a car park under the LEP. And it is a car park for the purpose of a single. Car park for the purpose of a single dwelling is permissible on the R2 zone land. And that building is still for the purpose of permissible use of that land. It doesn't matter that the car park is on a separate lot to the single dwelling. It's for the purpose of single dwelling and is therefore permissible.
Well,
Yeah, so
I agree with you
question.
philosophically, but the lawyer's objection goes on to say it's an independent use and it's to be properly characterised as a use for the purpose of car park, which is prohibited in a land zoned R2 low density. It cannot be approved. So that's the legal view for the legal expert. Sorry, Chris.
I've got highlighted Mr. Petros and Mr. Moloko raised their hand. You're willing to take some comment because we've got 10 minutes to go. It's up
Okay,
to you. It's up to you,
we
Chair.
need to get we have a motion, we're just having a discussion under the terms of the motion. We'll need to come back and get the wording very clear, I think, but unless there's anything persuades us to change our mind, but if Mr. Malocco,
Yes.
yes, please, Mr. Malocco, if you have a comment on that discussion, you're welcome to tell us.
Look, just quickly on the issue of Aboriginal, the archaeological issue. The Benjamin Street, the archaeologist who did the due diligence report that you have, indicated that the likelihood of anything of merit on the site of 2 Verrett Street would be unlikely. My understanding from the heritage report that the flat land where we're building this building was a tennis court for the larger heritage listed building up on Verrett Street, and so for that reason the site has been disturbed, and so has the midden in Benjamin Street's opinion, that the midden has been disturbed that's on the site of 2 Verrett Street as well, and is of lesser significance because of that. So I know there was a question that you were putting backwards and forwards in the panel about what the likelihood of finding something was. So I thought I'd just add that that piece of information, that because I dealt directly with Benjamin while he was putting together his report and walked around the site with him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Petros as well wants to say a final say. Mr. Petros?
Thank you. I don't want to keep you. Just the application was lodged in June last year, and given the letter came from Addison's yesterday, and that all the issues have been raised in the report, it seems unfair from a procedural perspective not to allow a deferral. We can address the legal aspects of that and respond to the letter which was received yesterday. And given it seems that everyone is in agreement that the built form and impacts are acceptable, and that I think each of the issues that have been raised from both neighbours don't actually raise an impact issue. It's more a procedural confirmation aspect. So I think it'd be only fair that we be granted the opportunity, given that we have provided additional information throughout the DA assessment, and we'd be given an opportunity to address the Addison's letter.
So you're urging us to move a deferral rather than refusal?
Of course, yes, please. It would seem fair on that basis.
Thank you.
While that was on, Mr. Chair, me and Cody put up his hand as well.
Ian, Cody?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The matter of the car parking was raised at some length in our submission to the application. The Addison's letter was a legal confirmation, not the first time it was raised. It was raised at length in our submission.
Thank you. All right, I just wonder whether the panel should go into camera.
I'm happy
Well,
to.
thank you for your comments, objectors and supporters. Thank you very much. The panel will now go into camera and discuss our final recommendations. Should go off camera, not in on camera. In camera.
Yeah, just hold on.